Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me so much pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of India Habitat Center and Mr. Benoy K Behl. Over the past 4 decades, art historian, filmmaker, and photographer Benoy K Behl has repeatedly traveled to all corners of India and through the many countries of Asia to document art and cultural heritage. In fact, the Limca Book of Records for the past 20 years has been giving him the record for being the most traveled art historian. The breadth of his vast coverage has given a new perspective to the understanding of Indian cultural history. Phenomena which sometimes may have appeared isolated or comparatively unexplained are often better understood and seen in their true cultural context through his broad ranging vision. The film which he shares with us today, Imperial City of Vijayanagara, is about one of the most glorious empires of the medieval period. In his repeated travels across India, Behl has visited the site of Hampi, the capital of the Vijayanagara Empire, at least 7 times, and his film captures the zest, vigor, and prosperity of that glorious time. This is the 14th event in the series Glimpses of Culture. Over to Mr. Benoy K Behl now. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. My many thanks to the India Habitat Center for this once again opportunity to share beautiful chapters from the cultural history of India with all of you. My grateful thanks to Doordarshan, who have, in a most unusual manner, for broadcasters of today, who have sponsored the making of my many films, including this one, deeply researched films on cultural history. Indeed, Doordarshan have over the past many years lived up so beautifully to their role of being public broadcasters. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, today's film takes us to a period of when there were winds of change in the culture of ancient India. And indeed, it seems that it was a rather unique culture in ancient India. Personalities were not considered very important. The happenings of the day-to-day world were not considered that important. In fact, the Chitra Sutra, the oldest known treatise on art making, states quite clearly that individuals and their personalities are not important enough for a subject as important as art. Therefore, portraits were not made, and people, individuals, were not depicted, though there was the making of hundreds of thousands of works of art depicting so many things, but individuals were not represented, portraits were not made. As a matter of fact, if you go back to the 3rd century BCE, kings did not even like to put their names upon their own inscriptions. They just wrote Devanampiya Piyadasi, one who is beloved of the divine and one whose vision is filled with adoration. Personalities and life in the world were considered so unimportant that even the permanency of stone structures, was kept for only for that which was made in the service of the eternal. royal residences and people's homes were made of ephemeral materials, materials that will not last, just like their personalities would not last and were not meant to last. It is only the eternal ideas which were meant to last. And with the passage of time, here we see a time of change, a time where we see in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries at Hampi, where you find for the first time the plinths of royal structures in India are being made out of stone. And later at Hampi, you find pleasure pavilions are being made out of stone. The art which used to depict only the eternal themes, here at Hampi, you see that it is beginning to present happenings of the world around us, the world as we see it, the here and now has become the subject of the art. As a matter of fact, kings are being presented, and in fact, you find even Portuguese traders who are coming and selling horses to the kings are being depicted. In fact, the horses were very important for the cavalry, had become of enormous importance to the Vijayanagara Empire. But the important thing is that in ancient times, though the material world was indeed important, what was considered far more important and was reserved as a subject of art, was reserved as a subject which would last, the subject which would be passed on from generation to generation, was only the thoughts of the eternal. Here we find the change has come and the present day happenings are being depicted in lasting stone. In a nutshell, there is vigor, there is zest in this period. And in a nutshell, we find that the site of Hampi presents us the joy of living in the world. Indeed, a change from ancient times, but a very fine world too, where the winds blow freely from the past and the present of that time and take us to a vigorous world of late medieval times in India. Indeed, a very prosperous world. And we have the good fortune that unlike most important sites, historic sites in India, which were all rebuilt upon often many times on the same place, Hampi was, after it was sacked in the 16th century, Hampi was not built upon again. So we have the remains of many, many structures which show us a glimpse of the life of those times. So ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to take you on this journey to the site of Hampi of the Vijayanagara Empire. Sushant, I would request you to please show the film. And my many thanks to you, Sushant, for the wonderful job that you do of the technical support for these talks. Thank you.
One of the great ruin sites of southern India, one could say perhaps one of the great ruin sites of all Asia. It's a UNESCO site now, of course, but what is so very fascinating about Hampi is that unlike other royal capitals, It was sacked and abandoned and never again occupied to any extent, so that the ruins there preserve something of what the city was like in the middle of the 16th century. This you cannot study for, let's say, Delhi or other great cities, because modern development has overtaken the sites. At Hampi, very little modern development has taken it. There's only one village really that has developed. The rest of the site is in this sort of wilderness. And what a wilderness! One of the most beautiful landscapes to be found anywhere in India. It's a granitic landscape. It's a sort of wild, rock-strewn landscape through which the Tungabhadra flows over rocks.
The beginning of the 14th century saw considerable political disruption in South India and the Deccan. This resulted from the repeated attacks of the Khalji and Tughlaq dynasties from the north. Out of the chaos, the sons of a chieftain named Sangama built a new and powerful kingdom called Vijayanagara, or City of Victory. The Vijayanagara Empire emerged in the mid-14th century and soon encompassed most of South India from coast to coast. It drew a line across the Deccan and prevented the further expansion of the sultanates to the north. By the mid-15th century, the kingdom stretched from North Karnataka to Kerala and from the Malabar Coast to Orissa. At Hampi, on the banks of the Tungabhadra River, was made the imperial capital of Vijayanagara. It was one of the greatest metropolises of the entire medieval world. Foreign travellers who came to the city could scarcely believe what their eyes saw.
This area is very much connected with two interlinking mythological systems. One is to do with Shiva and his consort Pampa, because this is a sacred place to Shiva. The other one is the Ramayana, especially the Kishkinda chapter of the Ramayana, where Rama and Lakshmana, in search of Sita, meet the monkeys. This is supposed to have taken place in the Hampi area. So the area has, I would say, a mythological importance. And this was relevant to a series of chieftains who wanted to become great emperors, and who did succeed in this endeavor.
Today, the ruins of Hampi cover more than 30 square kilometers, and more than 500 monuments have been identified. One can imagine what a sight must have met Abdur Razzak, an ambassador of Persia, when he visited Vijayanagara in 1442. He said, "The city of Vijayanagara is such that the pupil of the eye has never beheld a place such as this, nor the ear of intelligence ever been informed that there exists an equal to this anywhere in the world." Domino Paes, a Portuguese visitor to Vijayanagara between 1520 and 1522, says, "About the size of the city, I do not wish to write here because you cannot see all of it from any one place. However, I climbed on a high hill from where I could see a considerable part of it, and I must say that it was as large as Rome and very beautiful to the sight." Domino Paes also says, "The people in this city are countless in number, so much so that I do not wish to put it down, as it may be thought to be fabulous. This is the best provided city in the world. You will find here rubies, emeralds, diamonds, pearls, seed pearls, cloths, and every sort of thing which there is in the world to buy. And then in the evening, there are fairs in which common horses are sold," he says.
One of the most fascinating aspects of a study of this site is that here we have all different types of architecture. If you go to earlier Hindu capitals, let's say Tanjore on the Kaveri Delta. You go to Halebid of the Hoyslas, you can see almost nothing except temples. But if you go to Hampi in the 14th, 15th and 16th centuries on the Tungabhadra River, not only do you find temples, you find fortifications, you find gateways, you find granaries, you find stables, you find the remnants of palaces, of audience halls, of ceremonial platforms, of pleasure pavilions, of bathing ponds. You have a whole range of different architectures so that you can get the best possible idea of what really this place was like. And it's all set in this enormous scale over about 25 square kilometers. And in this area, we have alignments of structures which are now ruined, which give us indications of the roads. So we've been able to work out the road system that converged on the central palace zone. And we've been able to distinguish an area that we call the royal center of the city from the sacred center of the city. So we are building up a picture of what really life was like at one of the greatest capitals of India. To this, we add the historical data that's available to us. Many of the temples and the other monuments there have inscriptions in medieval Kannada mostly, and this gives us information about when the buildings were built, who paid for them, which kings were involved. And then we have the accounts of the Persian, Italian and Portuguese visitors to the site, because this being one of the richest cities in Asia, it attracted a continuous stream of visitors who wanted to trade with the Vijayanagara kings. The kings were extremely interested in having horses, which didn't do well in this part of India. So the Arabs and later the Portuguese monopolized the trade and shipping of horses from the Arabian Peninsula to the west coast of India and then across and through the Ghats to Hampi. And we have reports by these foreigners of what the city was like at the time. And this provides us with a tremendously vivid idea of everyday life and life during particular ceremonies, especially the great Mahanavami, when the kings hosted this enormous feast with parades of animals and troops. Another factor which we must not forget is that South India was the only source of diamonds in the world until modern times. And these diamond mines were in the territories of the Vijayanagara kingdom. After 1565, when Vijayanagara was sacked and lost to the Vijayanagara kings, part of these territories came under Golconda, and therefore these so-called Golconda diamonds became known under this name, and this is where the Europeans were very interested. Now, you couldn't get diamonds in Europe, you had to come to South India, and Vijayanagara, and then of Golconda in later times, became one of the places where you could buy diamonds. And this is, I think, another reason why this city was so very important, and stories about it circulated beyond India in the Timurid courts of Iran, as well as Portugal and Italy.
The Vijayanagara kings rebuilt the Virupaksha temple in the early 15th century at a site which had been venerated since ancient times. The main gateway or Gopura rises to about 170 feet. It is the largest Gopura built at Vijayanagar and a fine example of impressive South Indian gateways. A 13th century mandapa or hall in the Virupaksha temple has ceiling paintings which survive. These are in fact among the rare examples of mural paintings of the early period which remain in the country. The paintings are made on spiritual themes and are full of the vigor of those times. Next to the Virupaksha temple is a group of 8 temples of the 14th century dedicated to Jain Tirthankars. In fact, the kings of ancient India are known to have patronized the establishments of all faiths. And here we see that tradition carried forward well into the medieval period. In fact, the king of Vijayanagar also patronized mosques here at Hampi, and many who worked for him were Muslim. In the palace complex is a massive stone basement. This is what remains of a large structure called the Mahanaumi Dibba. The Portuguese traveller Domino Paes writes that it was erected to mark King Krishna Deva Raya's victorious military campaign in Orissa. Originally, there may have been a gorgeously decorated, many-storied pavilion on this platform. It is here that the king celebrated the 9 days of the Mahanaumi festival, which marks the victory of Durga over Mahishasura. This was also the occasion when the king used to review the armies and check the preparedness for battle. The spectacular celebrations and parades left a deep impression upon foreign visitors who have described them in great detail. There are reliefs made on the side of the Dibba which show these great processions. The king's armies are shown, and so are hunters and dancers. The military strength of the Vijayanagara Empire was dependent on its cavalry. Horses were exceedingly important to the kings of Vijayanagar. The Portuguese traded extensively with the kingdom of Vijayanagar. They brought large number of horses from Arabia, which they sold to the king here. In fact, this is a theme which features constantly in the friezes at Hampi. The Portuguese traders bringing so many horses, Arabian horses, before the king. In fact, there is one frieze of a Portuguese dancing with joy, and I wonder if it is because he has just made a very good deal. The joyous and exuberant life of the prosperous city of Hampi comes alive in these exquisite friezes. In ancient times, the subject of most Indian sculpture was the divine. Now, it is the here and now, life in the world as we see it, which became the subject of the artists. The men and women are made with robust bodies. Quite often, they are seen gesticulating. The coats, trousers, hats, beards, and upward turned moustaches of the foreigners are keenly observed and represented. This is the first time in India the royal pavilions were made with basements of stone. Previously, palaces were made of wood. The permanence of stone was reserved for structures dedicated to that which was divine, that which was eternal. Here in this time, we see significant changes taking place. There are a large number of palace structures and pleasure pavilions made out of stone which survive at Hampi. The Ramachandra Temple was most probably made towards the end of the 15th century. The enclosure wall of the temple continues the themes seen in the friezes of the Mahanaumi Dibba. The carvings here are finely finished and have a more controlled and formal presentation than the earlier ones. However, the liveliness of the Dibba carvings is not found here in this courtly style. The lowest panel shows elephants. The second has horses with grooms. and the third has parading soldiers. Above these are dancers and musicians, and the top panel shows the festivities of the Vasantotsav. The figures all move in a clockwise direction towards the eastern gateway of the temple. In the lower four panels, a seated royal figure is made. The rows of men, women and animals are all coming to pay homage to him. These panels display the power of the king, his wealth, his military forces and his queens. On the southern bank of the Tungabhadra River is a great Vaishnava complex. It is approached through a great chariot street and bazaar. A tank is constructed to one side, where both festivals of the deities were once held. At the end of the chariot street is the Vithala Temple, made within a large walled enclosure.
The Vitala Temple, which is an abandoned monument from the middle of the 16th century, must be considered one of the great showpieces of Hindu religious art in South India. The way in which this rather crude, roughly coursed material, this granite, this local granite, was fashioned to create the most complex architectural interiors, with columns, with cut-out colonnettes and sculptures all out of one block, is among the most amazing virtuoso performances of Indian architecture that we have.
A stone ratha modelled on the wooden processional carts of the temples is made before the mandapa. It had a tower above which was visible till the 19th century. This is not a monolithic structure but is made of carved stones.
Following some of the earlier models of Pallava and Chola architecture from Tamil Nadu, the temple at Vijayanagara was always considered as a planned complex with a wall around it, a monumental gopura or towered gateway on one side, and in the middle the main monument, the main temple itself, with a number of accessory mandapas or columned halls where all sorts of other activities could take place.
On the plinth of the main mandapa of the temple, there is a fine relief of Portuguese merchants with their horses. By this period, the main focus of attention had shifted from plinth reliefs to the many pillars made within the halls. These rearing leogryphs with riders emerging from pillars became the hallmark of Vijayanagara art. These were also a source of inspiration for the Nayaka period which was to follow. The Vijayanagara pillars are carved with a rich variety of forms, drawn from mythology as well as daily life. A Lakshmi Narsimha sculpture carved out of a single rock symbolizes the spirit and power of the Vijayanagara Empire. It was established by King Krishna Deva Raya in 1529. The Narasimha avatar of Vishnu is part human, part lion. He represents the courage and vigor within us with which we would combat the demons of our ignorance. And this monolithic stone representation, 22 feet high, is certainly one which reminds us of that courage and vigor within us. The great capital of the Vijayanagara Empire exhilarates the visitor. The structures and its art speak of a vigor and a zest for life. Indeed, Hampi was one of the most celebrated metropolises of medieval India. Perhaps the comment of Abdur Razzak, ambassador of Persia in the 15th century, best brings alive the prosperous life of Hampi then. He says, roses are sold everywhere. These people cannot live without roses, and they look upon them as quite as necessary as food. What a wonderful city and culture this must have been.
So the people of Hampi considered roses to be quite as essential to their lives as food and drink. What a marvelous, prosperous place it was. And we know more about this because this was in late medieval times, and there are the records of so many travelers left behind. But this is the prosperity which surely prevailed across the Deccan and across India for many centuries preceding this. As a matter of fact, the Deccan was one of the very earliest places in the world to grow cotton. And this led to the making of the most exquisite textiles and a great deal of interaction with the rest of the world. An interflow of culture, an interflow of wealth, and great prosperity. The development of sophisticated culture and urban culture and urbane culture, as we see in the art from ancient times coming up to this period. Now, those of you who will be visiting Hampi, as I did mention to Kamini, who is in the audience, must make it a point to climb on top of the Matanga hill. And if you can take the trouble to do so before sunrise and see the rising sun and see the early morning light on the site of Hampi from this vantage point on top of the Matanga hill, you see the site beautifully and you get a good idea of the expanse of the site, the grandeur of the site. Of course, till the last time I went there, one had to be very careful as it is pitch dark at that time, well before sunrise. And you have to make sure that you carry torches. But for all you know, some light arrangement may have been made on this rocky path going up the hill by now. And I would be very happy to answer any questions if you have them, and I will request Sujata Chatterji to please read them out from the chat box to me. And my many thanks also to Sujata Chatterji, who helps me with all that I do, makes what I do possible. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Benoy. Some comments. Sunita Dwivedi saying excellent narration and slides. Thanks, Benoy.
Thank you.
Dr. Shiva Rama V saying beautiful narrative. Thanks, Benoy.
Thank you.
Neeru Pandya saying lovely, very impressive. Thanks, Neeru from Iowa, USA.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kamini Dandapani That was brilliant. Thank you. I have a question about the frieze figures on the Ramanavami Dibba and other places. How do you identify the Portuguese, Arabs, etc.?
Kamini, it is the kind of clothes they are wearing. It is the mustaches and beards and caps and jackets and clothes which they wear. In fact, this is not. It is the here and now being depicted, which is unusual in which is not to be found so much in the ancient period, but which you see happening now. It is this what is happening in the world around us, which is being depicted, along with the joy of life, which is being depicted in the art of Hampi. Thank you.
Sanjeev Nair, that's a comment. Sunrise is awesome. See reflection on Virupaksha and Krishna temples.
Yes, it is so beautiful to be there at that time. Thank you.
Sunita Dwivedi will definitely visit and climb up the hill. Will also study the reliefs.
Marvelous. The reliefs are absolutely marvelous. I'm sure you will enjoy it so much. Thank you.
Well, there don't seem to be any more questions. So till we get any more questions, I'll take this opportunity to invite you all to our next screening, which is on the 15th of October, same time on a Saturday. And this is a film called Darshan of the Divine. Maybe Benoy can say a few words about it.
This is a film about Chola bronzes. I'm sure that it's a lovely subject and all of you will enjoy it very much.
Rajendra Khimesra saying congratulations and greetings from Bangkok.
Pleasure to hear from you, and it was so good to meet you recently in Bangkok. Thank you.
Dr. Shivarama V, how would you compare Hampi to the sculptures in Mahabalipuram?
Mahabalipuram is of a much earlier period, and it has the exquisite gentleness. It has the subtle grace of the art of the ancient period. Mamallapuram, the art takes us into another realm. It is, and it is also very naturalistic. The animals are treated just like human beings. You have unforgettable images of the calf being licked by the mother cow as it drinks milk, and everywhere is that subtle, very subtle quality of the ancient art of India, the very personal quality that takes you deep into the art and deep within yourself. That is the greatness of the finest art of India. Now we have come into a period which begins to express the vigor of life, which doesn't carry us away into the subtle nuances deep within us, but it expresses the vigor of life. It expresses the joy of life. So this is a great change which is taking place right in this period, and this is also very important as the period of change, the winds of change. Thank you.
Kamini Dandapani, any book or books in particular you would recommend for reading up on Hampi?
Well, you could see my book on the art of India in 2 volumes that would have a chapter on Hampi, and on Hampi itself, I cannot immediately think of what else to suggest. Thank you.
There don't seem to be any more questions.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My thanks again to the India Habitat Center, and look forward to the pleasure of sharing more with you next month. Thank you. Bye-bye.